Welcome back. If you haven't seen the earlier parts, I really recommend going back and watching those. This story hits different when you feel every step of it. For those who have been here, I'm glad you're still with me. Let's keep going, right from where we left off. This isn't just a timeline, it's the truth I lived through. Raw, unfiltered. Not just what happened, but what it looked like. Because sometimes surviving doesn't look like strength. Sometimes it looks like barely holding on. And this is what it looked like for me. Kind of hurt. But one of those new friends ended up telling the school counselor that I was self-harming. And the day of court, when Whitney was supposed to pick me up, was the day they decided to pull me aside. They asked me if I was cutting. I tried to lie. They made me show my arm, and it was bad. Those scars, if you ever see them, those are from that time. I told them about the custody case. They agreed to let Whitney be the adult they informed. When she got there, I told her she had to come inside, and they showed her my arm. I'll never forget the look on her face. She broke. She just stood there crying, and I cried with her. We hugged, and then we drove straight to court. On the way, she told Brett. In the courtroom, she told the judge everything. She had it all written down in a notebook, every incident, every detail. My mom tried to fight it. She showed up drunk, still tried to argue, still tried to twist the story. But the judge saw through it. At the end, they cleared the room, left just me and the judge, and he asked me what I wanted. I said I wanted to live with Whitney, but no one knew the full weight of that day, not even Whitney. Because if Whitney lost custody, if the judge sent me back, I wasn't just scared. I wasn't wavering or unsure. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't keep living. I had made my decision. I had already planned how I'd disappear, how I'd end the pain. There was no room left for hope, no space for a future. I couldn't take one more night in that hell house. I had already planned how to say goodbye. I had already decided to leave this world behind. That was my breaking point, the moment where hope felt impossible. But she won. She got temporary guardianship, 3 months. And the judge gave my mom one last chance. 3 months to show she was sober, attending AA, and taking accountability. She didn't do any of it. So on December 13th, 2017, Whitney got full guardianship. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel trapped. The first few weeks living with Whitney and Brett felt like an adrenaline rush. Not in a dramatic way, not chaos or panic, but in the way that peace felt unfamiliar. Like I didn't know how to sit still inside safety. For the first time in my life, things were normal. We had dinner every night, breakfast every morning. They asked me about my day every day. And I could feel care, consistency, warmth. All the little things you don't realize you're starving for until someone finally gives them to you. I didn't flinch when I heard footsteps. I didn't have to brace for impact when I said the wrong thing. I didn't have to be anything but a kid. At first, I tried to keep communication with my mom, but that got toxic fast. The last conversation we ever had, I told her she was a drunk, told her she ruined my life, told her I had over 1,000, 2,000 scars because of her. That until she got sober, I didn't want anything to do with her. No contact, no visits, no presence in my life. Nothing. And I didn't know it then, but those would be the last words I ever said to my mother. For a while, I was riding this high. Not of happiness exactly, but of escape. Of not being in danger anymore. That alone felt euphoric. But I never got to process any of it. I didn't unpack the trauma. I didn't talk about what happened. No one knew the full stories. Not really. Not until now. Back then, I just shoved everything into this sealed box in my mind, and I called it survival. I didn't even realize what that was doing to me. But over time, that unspoken pain started showing up in different ways. Ways I couldn't explain. Ways I didn't even understand myself. There were times I acted irrationally, made up things, exaggerated stories. Not because I wanted to lie, but because some desperate part of me just needed someone to care. I needed attention, not in the shallow sense, but in the please look at me and see that I'm still hurting kind of way. And that created problems, because it blurred the line between what was true and what people thought was just drama. But even in the moments where I was honest, where I was raw and scared and trying to understand myself, I still felt so deeply unseen. Whitney, she was incredible. She listened, she validated, she made me feel heard in ways I never had before. But then, she'd tell Brett. And Brett, he didn't know how to sit with emotion. If you didn't feel what he thought you should feel, then you were wrong. Not just mistaken, wrong. He'd tell me I shouldn't be upset, that I shouldn't feel the way I felt, that I was being dramatic. And I started to believe him. I started to think maybe I was crazy, that maybe everything was my fault, that maybe I really was the reason all those things had happened to me. And when you're 15 and you've already been to hell and back, that kind of confusion is dangerous. I started spiraling. After almost a year of euphoria, of living off that high of finally being safe, everything I'd stuffed away started to surface. And nobody was there to help me sort through it. Everyone thought, you're safe now, you're fine now. But trauma doesn't care about safety. It doesn't vanish just because the war is over. Sometimes it screams louder once the noise outside has gone quiet. And the truth is, people thought they were helping, and maybe they were helping in the best way that they knew how, but all it was doing was causing even more damage to an already extremely damaged and broken 15-year-old girl. By that December, just a couple weeks before Christmas, I tried to end my life. I don't even remember exactly what I said. I was texting a friend, just gibberish, but she knew something was wrong. She called Whitney and Brett. They found me, rushed me to the hospital, and just like that, I was spending 3 weeks in a behavioral health hospital. 3 weeks that held Christmas, New Year's, my birthday. They tried to send me to a long-term facility, 9 months, but I fought back, and they let me come home. But I wasn't met with open arms. There were no warm hugs, no I'm so glad you're okay. Instead, it was discipline, punishment. You did this, now you pay the price. My first day back, they went snowmobiling, and I wasn't allowed to go. Instead, Brett trashed my room, military style, left it destroyed for me to clean. And the second they left, I collapsed to the floor, held my dad's urn in my hands, and just broke. Wondering how different life would be if he was still there. If the one person who loved me unconditionally, treated me with the most kindness, and cared not just for, but about me, on a level no one else ever has, hadn't been taken from me at such an early age. 3 hours of sobbing, 3 hours of every piece of me unraveling. Then I wiped my face, and I cleaned the whole room, because that was my punishment for wanting to die. After I finished, I grabbed the radio Brett had left me because I wasn't allowed to have a phone, hopped on my bike, and rode to my sister's house. We hadn't talked much. She knew I'd been in the hospital, but that night, I told her everything. Begged her to get me out, to bring me to her place, to keep my mom out of it. She said she talked to Whitney, but couldn't promise anything, that if she got involved, my mom might still be around. And after that, the open door policy Whitney once promised, where I could leave if I wanted to, disappeared. She told me I had to stay. And maybe now I can understand that. Maybe running wasn't the answer. Maybe I needed to stay and fight through it. But no one saw how deep the wounds were. No one stopped to say, let's help you carry this. No one realized how lost and alone I was. I was 16 years old. I'd already survived so much, and still, I was drowning, begging silently for someone to throw a rope. But no one came. Things weren't getting better, they were just getting quieter. I had learned how to shut the world out with a smile.
how to numb my face, my voice, my body, until even I started believing the lie. That I was fine, that I was better. But I wasn't, and people kept trying. They kept throwing advice and solutions and rules at me like they could tape me back together. And maybe they really were trying to help in the best way they knew how, but I don't think they had any idea what they were doing. I don't think they knew how to hold a girl who had already fallen apart so many times that she couldn't remember who she used to be. And maybe they wanted to help, but that doesn't change what it did. Because every time they tried to fix me without listening to me, every time they spoke over my silence or made decisions for me instead of with me, it dug the wound deeper. It didn't bring healing. It brought more damage. I became really, really good at disappearing in plain sight. I'd smile and nod, I'd say all the right things, but inside I was screaming, begging someone, anyone to really see me. But nobody did. So I started cutting again, silently, in places no one would notice. Because at least then the pain was mine. At least then it made sense. I was on 17 different pills a day, some to wake me up, some to calm me down, some to make me feel anything at all. And most days, I didn't feel alive. I just existed, drifting through the motions like a ghost in my own skin, a puppet with painted-on expressions. And even on the days where everything looked calm on the outside, there was a war happening inside of me. But I kept pretending, because the moment I stopped, the questions started, the concerned glances, the lectures. So I shut up. I buried everything, and I carried it like a backpack full of bricks that no one could see. And the weight made me crumble in ways I didn't even recognize at first. I started reacting in ways I couldn't control, spiraling over small things, trusting people I shouldn't, getting hurt in ways I should have seen coming. I was constantly confused, constantly doubting myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what was real, what was fake, what was me, what was the mask. I just knew what people wanted me to be, and I knew I couldn't be that and also be me. So I chose them, and I buried me. Somewhere in all of that, my sister and I started talking again. She told me our mom had been sober, that she was trying, that she missed me. And for a second, just a second, I let hope in. Maybe we could fix it. Maybe we could try again, slowly, carefully. So I made a decision. It had been 4 months since the mental hospital, and even if I still felt like I was held together with duct tape, I wanted to believe I was ready. So I told Whitney. I said I wanted to reconnect. We agreed I could buy a new phone with my own money, activate it, and maybe reach out. That was the plan. We were supposed to go on April 25th, 2019, 2 days after payday. And I remember that day so clearly, because I came from school, nervous but excited, hopeful, like maybe something in my life was finally going to go right. I asked Whitney if we were still going. She said yes, but told me someone was coming to see me first. I didn't think much of it. 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it. It was my sister and her husband, and I knew. Before they said a word, I knew. They looked hollow, like they'd been crying for hours, like they were holding something so heavy it might crush them if they said it out loud. I asked what was wrong, and my sister couldn't even look me in the eye. She looked at her husband and whispered, "I can't tell her." And I felt something rip in my chest. He looked at me and his eyes were full of something I never wanted to see again. He said, "Your mom passed away last night." Everything stopped. The air, the light, the sound. I remember crying before I even fully processed what he said, sinking to the floor like my legs forgot how to stand. My sister started crying. He started crying. We were all sobbing in a heap on the porch when Whitney came outside. I asked what happened. Nobody knew. Maybe it was her health. She was 58, years of addiction, years of damage. That's what they told me. But not even a week later, I found out the truth. She didn't die from health issues. She took her own life. It was suicide, and nobody wanted to say it out loud. Not to me, not then. My sister wouldn't even confirm it until 3 years later when my nephew overdosed. We had to make the decision to pull the plug. She decided standing outside the hospital 10 minutes later was the best time to bring it up and confirm it. So for years, I lived with this unbearable silence. No closure, no final conversation, just a cold, empty ending. And the worst part, the most shattering part, was finding out that in her suicide note, she blamed me. She said she couldn't handle me leaving. She said losing me was one of the reasons she did it. So now, every time I think about reconnecting, every time I think about healing, I'm reminded of what I've lost, of what I never got. No apology, no second chance, no final hug. Just a door that closed before I could knock, and the echo of a goodbye I never got to hear. When it came to the week of my mom's funeral, I stayed with my sister. My brother had flown in from California. Me and my brother didn't grow up together. He was one of the lucky ones. He had a dad who saw the damage early enough to pull him out, to give him some kind of stability. And yeah, I know it wasn't perfect for him either, but he had something I never had. Safety, consistency, a chance. We only saw each other every few years growing up, and still, somehow, in that tiny sliver of time, less than 6 months total across my entire life, he felt more like home to me than anyone else ever had. Because even in that short time, he saw me. He treated me like I was more than just a problem to fix or a burden to carry. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was lovable, like I was worthy of being loved. So when he and my sister came to me, sat me down, and said they wanted to take custody of me together, bring me back into the family now that our mom was gone, I believed them. I wanted to believe them. I wanted that family. I wanted a fresh start. I wanted to feel like someone finally chose me. And I was still so young, 16 and still so broken, still so desperate to feel wanted, still so easily manipulated, still wearing all my wounds on the outside like open skin. So of course I said yes. But I didn't say yes to what came next. I didn't say yes to my brother and sister showing up to Whitney's house on Mother's Day without me, demanding she sign over custody. I didn't say yes to the way they spoke to her, the way they made it seem like I didn't want to be there anymore. That wasn't true. That wasn't how I felt. But it didn't matter, because that wedge was driven, and it drove itself deep. Me and Whitney never really got to talk about it, at least not for years. And by then, the damage was already done. We still talk now, and she'll always be my mom. She was the first and only mom I had that was an actual mom. But for a long time, our relationship was severely damaged. Moving in with my sister was supposed to be a safe option, but what I walked into wasn't safety. It was chaos in a different outfit. Sure, she wasn't on drugs anymore, but she was a heavy alcoholic. And maybe she wasn't like Mom, screaming or throwing things, but the drinking still changed her. It still made the nights unpredictable, still made me feel unsafe. And on top of that, her son, my nephew, who was actually older than me by about 1.5 years, he had spiraled into his own addiction. And that meant strange, sketchy people in and out of the house at all hours. That meant waking up with some guy sitting on the edge of my bed, or getting disgusting comments when I got out of the shower. That meant sleeping with one eye open again, if I even slept at all. I had to start hiding my stuff. Not that it helped. Things still went missing all the time. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't rest. Felt like I was back in my mom's house, just with a new cast of characters. And then there were the fights. Me and my nephew clashed hard. Him, high out of his mind, me calling him out because I never learned how to stay quiet. It would go from screaming matches to actual fights. Him pinning me to walls, wrestling me to the ground. But we were both teenagers, so nobody saw it for what it really was. They just said it was kids being kids, but it wasn't. It was survival. I was constantly in survival mode. I started sleeping in my car again, sometimes outside the house, sometimes down the road, sometimes in the McDonald's parking lot where I worked. I'd sleep a couple hours just to survive my next shift, then I'd go home, do my online college work, and do it all over again. Because I still wanted something more for myself, even if it felt like the world didn't want that for me. Not long after that, I met my ex-girlfriend. We were young. And now, years later, we're friends. We've talked through it. We've acknowledged that we were both struggling, both lost, both trying to fill holes we didn't know how to name. But back then, I just wanted to be loved. That was all I ever wanted. She gave me that love. Then she took it away. Then gave it again. Then took it again. It was push and pull, conditional, unstable. And I clung to it like it was air, like it was the only thing keeping me alive. Because maybe it was. She'd kick me out during fights, but I was terrified to leave, because if I left, especially during COVID, I couldn't come back. So I'd stay in my car, hours, overnight sometimes, napping in parking lots, pretending I was okay, pretending I wasn't breaking, just so she wouldn't leave me. The fights got worse, the emotional abuse started piling up, and I let it happen because I thought I deserved it, because my self-worth was already gone.
Take a minute, breathe, get a drink of water, maybe a snack. But if this part hit, stay with me, because the story's not over yet. I promise it does end up eventually ending on a much happier note. So go to the next part. And if you haven't already, subscribe, comment something, leave a like, share. Help me get my story out there. Thank you guys.